Good afternoon to you. 5:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Mary Margaret Olohan joins us from the Daily Signal. We'll talk about how YouTube is now censoring the story of detransitioners. That is, people who know they were born in the right body, and they start saying it out loud. YouTube censors that, of course. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yesterday, in front of the House Oversight Committee, 2 IRS whistleblowers laid out the corruption within the federal government on behalf of the Biden family. And so Democrat Congressman Dan Goldman, the smug heir to the Levi Strauss fortune, tried to suggest that Joe Biden did nothing wrong, but he accidentally stepped on a rake of his own creation because he suddenly found himself admitting that Joe Biden had discussed foreign business dealings with Hunter.
And you testified that he said that Hunter told his dad, according to Rob Walker, quote, "I may be trying to start a company or try to do something with these guys." Now, let me ask you something. That doesn't sound much like Joe Biden was involved in whatever Hunter Biden was doing with the CEFC if Hunter Biden is telling him that he's trying to do business with them, does it?
No, but it does show that he told his father he was trying to do business. And he was
okay, well, that is true. Hunter Biden does try to do business. That's correct. Yes. So you not only have no direct evidence connecting Joe Biden to any of Hunter Biden's business deal, you actually had proof that he wasn't involved. That is the proof that you had.
That was a weird moment where Dan Goldman does admit that Hunter was talking to Joe Biden about business dealings. Remember, Biden once said this.
Mr. Vice President, how many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
Yeah, sure. Sure you haven't. Congresswoman Virginia Foxx represents North Carolina's 5th Congressional District. She's a member of that Oversight Committee, and she was there yesterday. Congresswoman, good to have you with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Vince. I'm a big fan of WMAL. Listen to it in the morning and at night.
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you, Congresswoman. Tell us about your experience yesterday. What did you think of the testimony from those IRS whistleblowers?
Well, first, I'm glad to hear you say what you say about Dan Goldman. He certainly has been smug and arrogant in that committee on several occasions. I didn't know about his background, but that explains some of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Democrats were pretty smug and arrogant a lot yesterday on the committee. And, they never want to get to the truth, Vince. That's what struck a lot of us yesterday. They kept trying to divert attention away from Hunter and Joe Biden. That was the message coming out of that committee yesterday as far as the Democrats are concerned. They will never, ever admit that, as I said yesterday, something's rotten in the state of Delaware. Apologies to Mr. Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something is very rotten. Those IRS whistleblowers laid out in some fascinating detail the extent to which they were constantly blockaded from conducting their investigation into the Biden family. They were told they could not speak to various Biden grandchildren. They were told they could not pursue dad. They were told they could not ask questions about the big guy. Have you ever seen or heard of a federal investigation that was as restricted and as hard to conduct as this one?
No, that is absolutely the truth. And they stopped the Secret Service and the Biden transition team tipped off the Bidens about the interview between the IRS and FBI investigators. The FBI and IRS investigators outright prevented the planned interview. They let the time lapse so that Hunter Biden couldn't be charged with felonies. I mean, again, there's a rot here that goes very, very deep. And I defend particularly the FBI But, Vince, we've got to find this strain of FBI and IRS people who are causing these problems, who are not being like the whistleblowers and upholding their oath. You know, the whistleblowers talked about the oath to the Constitution, which all of us take. But the people who are in collusion, it really is collusion. The Democrats talk about Russian collusion. Well, this is collusion of the worst kind. People sworn to uphold the Constitution who are colluding with criminals.
It's really scary to see. Do you get the impression, if you could measure how brave it is for these whistleblowers to come out and to speak in public, how do you assess it? It seems to me that they're taking big risks to themselves personally and professionally.
Oh, my gosh, the biggest risk of all. And they've already been punished for it. They've already been isolated. As Mr. Ziegler said yesterday, his supervisors won't speak to him. Mr. Shapley said that work has been taken away from them. You know, it's not hard for the people in their departments to really isolate them and stigmatize them. And that's not good in a working environment. It's so unfair. The American people should give thanks every night to the good Lord that these two brave men came forth, and pray for more to come forth. I believe there are more who will come forth, Vince. I think we'll find out more information as we follow the paths where they lead us.
I did hear Mr. Ziegler say a couple times yesterday in the open testimony that he can provide more information, but he has to do it with the Ways and Means Committee. That's the only way you can take sensitive IRS information and give it to Congress, and then it would be sent on to your committee. So it does sound like there is more to come.
Oh, we absolutely believe there's more to come. And, you know, it took a while to get to the point where we discovered the $17 million that the Bidens have been paid. At first it was $6 million. Then we kept finding more and more and more. And I know the American people are frustrated. Everywhere I go in my district, people are so angry. And I get letters from people saying,
yes,
you know, impeach, put them in jail. But we have to be law-abiding ourselves. What I explain to my constituents is we have to be methodical. We cannot act like the Democrats. We just can't do that. Otherwise, our country falls apart.
Although I will say the mountain of evidence against the Biden administration and the federal government is unbelievable at this point. I know that your committee, the Oversight Committee, fought with Christopher Wray, the FBI director, for some time to get a hold of this confidential human source report in the form of what's called an FD 1023 that detailed
Correct.
An alleged bribery scheme between the CEO of Burisma and the Biden family. That document was released today in its entirety with some small redactions for the name or the identifier of the confidential human source by Senator Chuck Grassley. I read it at the beginning of our show. The public is now seeing this document. Congresswoman, it is unbelievable the allegations that lie within that document, to include $5 million payments each to Hunter and Joe Biden, conversations with Hunter and Joe Biden that were had by the CEO of Burisma. He says that he was coerced into paying them in exchange for getting the prosecutor in Ukraine fired. It's jaw-dropping to even find out all of these details at this late date.
Oh, and I think, again, this is the tip of the iceberg, Vince. There's more. Yes, and it's unfortunately the whistleblowers were never allowed to review the FD 1023, and neither were other people who in the IRS and that were trying to do their job to make sure that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden are treated like average Americans. It is just wrong what they are doing. Absolutely wrong.
Well, especially after all these lectures from the Democrats over the years about how nobody is above the law. It sure seems like the Biden family are way above it.
Oh, yeah, we noticed we haven't heard those lectures much recently. And so you're exactly right. The Bidens started this a long time ago. You know, Lord Acton said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. They have felt for a long time that they're above the law. And it's time that we prove to the American people that no one's above the law. Democrats, because of their dominance in politics, in states, in many cases, and certainly in the federal government, have gotten by with way more than they should have gotten by with.
You know, I'm glad to hear from these whistleblowers, but now I'd like to hear from the officials who were dealing with these IRS investigators. You know, just as a citizen who's concerned about this, I'd like to start hearing from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware. Put Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf on the stand and have her begin telling us, why were you telling these guys they weren't allowed to ask questions about Dad or the big guy? Why were you involved in tipping off the Biden Secret Service? Why was Biden world finding out about investigative activities in the days before they even occurred? They were supposed to be surprises. Why were they being tipped off? Are we going to begin to get answers like this?
Well, we have to keep probing. This is why it was so important that we got the majority in the House, Vince. If we had not gotten the majority in the House, slim as it is, we would not have been able to do this. And thank goodness that Chuck Grassley has this great reputation with whistleblowers that have allowed so that people have felt comfortable coming to him. But yes, Chairman Comer and Chairman Jordan and Chairman Smith, and every member of these committees, we're going to pursue this where it goes, no matter who has been involved. We're going to get to the root of this, but we have to stay in the majority. Congresswoman
Virginia Foxx, you know, I'm glad you brought up that whistleblowers are approaching Chuck Grassley, and I want to ask you a question that's almost unique to our audience, and you could help me with this. If there's anybody within the sound of our voices right now who does have information like this and wants to figure out how do they bring it in such a way that they can do it safely without and perhaps anonymously, what would you recommend? Is it to approach Senator Grassley's office? How would they go about doing that?
Well, I would do that, but I think also, Vince, I have not looked at our website for the Oversight Committee, but I feel certain there will be some place on the Oversight Committee website that would tell people where to go, because we've been advertising this a lot, that if there are other whistleblowers out there, please come forward. If somebody wanted to call my office, just look me up and call my office, and I'll be happy to talk with them and put them in touch with Senator Grassley or the appropriate person. Again, I think if they call Congressman Comer's office or my office or Senator Grassley's office, we could make sure they're taken care of.
Yeah, just don't call Dan Goldman. He would destroy you.
That's right.
You don't want to call that guy. He's awful. All right, Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, thank you very much. Great to talk to you today. Yeah, I should point out, in the midst of all the craziness going on in our country, we did just get the headline in the last half hour. Perhaps you heard Rachel Sutherland tell us. The NFL has approved the sale of the Washington Redskins for a record $6 billion. Maybe they'll start winning. That would be good. That's what everybody's looking for. I'm not involved in the cash exchange here at all. I have nothing to do with that. I just want a team in town that wins football games. I think that's all I'm asking for. So we'll see what happens. The Washington Commanders, they call them the Commanders these days. The Redskins being sold by owner Dan Snyder. The deal went through. Meanwhile, I just saw this. The writer Ian Miles Chung shared this. Apparently, there's a video going around TikTok right now of a young lady crying that she's angry that feminists ever fought to get women into the workforce because she's very tired. She's very upset that she has to live with the consequences of that decision.
Whoever fought for women to get jobs, why? Why did we do that? I am so tired. I want to just put my feet up. I am Oh my God.
Is this shtick or real? Do you think it's shtick? Corey, I think you think it's shtick. But she's definitely sobbing. She's upset. She said she's so tired. She just wants to put her feet up. Why would feminists do this to her? Why do they fight for jobs? This could be a part of a recent trend. There's been some videos lately from a variety of female influencers who are arguing for something very different than what we live with now. There's a woman called Pearl Davis I've noticed lately who's driving women crazy online. She released a video recently saying that she was doing an inventory of what things women are better at than men, and here's what she concluded.
All right, guys, so I have spent the last couple weeks genuinely trying to think of something that women are better at. And this didn't come out of malicious intent. This didn't come out of trying to put women down or whatever. Genuinely, I was just looking at some numbers.
She's just grabbing the third rail.
I'm like, what are women better at? Well, the premise is women are more caring and nurturing. Well, if so, why are we more likely to kill infants and elders? Wouldn't the most caring and nurturing gender? So then I was like, okay, I guess that number doesn't make sense. So then I started asking myself, what about teaching? Women are better teachers. Turns out we have ruined the education system.
Oh my God.
Two women cannot teach as effectively as one man.
Oh, she's just rolling hand grenades. She's like, here, catch this. The things people say. Mary Margaret Olohan joins us next. She's a woman who's very talented at her job of journalism, and she's dug into the way that YouTube is censoring the truth. The details ahead. Good afternoon. 5:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL.
About 15, I started hearing about transgenderism on the internet, and a lot of the things I heard really rang true with me, like, you are trans if, and it was things like, you hate your body, you don't feel comfortable with it, you want to be a different person. And with everything I was going through, I thought that if I aligned my body with my brain or something like that, I would feel better. The trans community really love-bombed me. I hated myself, and I was convinced that everyone around me hated me. So when they started really celebrating the fact that I was born in the wrong body, I felt cared for, I felt loved. It was genuine love bombing. It was like kindness over the top all of the time.
That's the story of a young woman named Prisha Mosley who was dragged into radical gender ideology and had an industry destroy her until she was able to get out. She's now shared her story online on YouTube, but that corporation has decided that's a story that you shouldn't hear. For more on this, I want to turn to Mary Margaret Olohan. She's with the Daily Signal, and she's reporting on this today. Mary Margaret, great to have you with us, as always.
So great to be here.
Tell us the story of Prisha Mosley and what happened on YouTube.
Yes, so Prisha is an incredibly brave woman who's been speaking out about her attempted gender transition. Of course, we know that you can't actually change your gender to become a boy, but that's what Prisha was told that she could do when she was a lonely young teenager. You know, her mother was an alcoholic. Prisha was struggling with mental health issues. She felt like she couldn't get her voice out there, and everyone was paying attention to her mom, so she turned to the internet. She was anorexic, and so she was in all these pro-anorexia communities, and they quickly led her to pro-trans communities. And the next thing you knew, she was being told that she was a boy and that she would be happier living as a boy. And so Prisha sought the help of therapists. They affirmed these ideas. She ultimately got on testosterone. She started taking testosterone injections, and these really are affecting her a lot, but she thought that things would get better if she got surgery too. That's how she would really feel affirmed as a boy. So she underwent a double mastectomy when she was 17 years old. And she says now very firmly that at 17, you don't know if you're going to regret this someday.
Yes.
You have no idea whether you'll want to nurse your child someday. That's not a decision that you should be able to make, particularly when, like Prisha, you're suffering from so much mental health issues, and you have for so many years.
Yes.
And Prisha also, she was a victim of a rape when she was a young woman, and that also intensely affected how she viewed femininity, sexuality, the relations between the sexes in general. And so
Yes.
all these things were affecting her, but she was allowed to undergo this incredibly sad and tragic transition.
By the way, I want to emphasize something you just said. You said she was raped as a young girl. This is not an uncommon theme of many of the people who are dragged into this radical gender ideology. Rape and sexual abuse is much more common among people who start identifying and saying that they don't like their bodies and start identifying as the opposite sex. Much more common than it is among the general population, correct?
Oh, yeah. No, abuse is very common among people who are sharing their stories of detransition, as is early pornography consumption. And I have a project on that I'll be sharing more details about soon. But the rates of which these young women were exposed to pornography at a young age, and the way this abuse and the pornography played into their understandings of femininity and sexuality, it's very, very sad and upsetting. You know, like, young women should be allowed to develop and have an innocent childhood and to grow up, and to only then begin learning about things like sex and you know, just more weightier topics. But these girls weren't allowed to experience childhood like that. And
Yes.
among a lot of other things, it really affected their notions of gender.
In a moment, we'll move into more details about how YouTube is handling everything. But first, let me play some audio. This is from October of last year. Prisha uploaded a video to YouTube expressing her regret about being convinced that her body was a mistake by this gender industry. Take a listen.
I can't believe this happened. I ruined my life. When you break it down, I decided that I didn't want to be a woman before I had ever even experienced being a woman. I had no idea what being a woman was like because I was a child, and now I feel like I will never entirely know. I want to say that I really feel like some people in the trans community and the trans medicalists and the doctors really, really target the most vulnerable of us. I have borderline personality disorder, and I know for a fact that this is the reason for my transition. It's a very difficult mental illness, and one of the core features is not having any sense of self or identity, and my doctors knew this.
In other words, a struggling girl was exploited. Now, let's talk about YouTube's role in all of this. What can you tell us, Mary Margaret?
Yeah, so Kelsey Bolar with the Independent Women's Forum, she did this remarkable interview with Prisha, and they uploaded that to YouTube, and it's been up since, I believe, December, and at some point since December, and keep in mind, Prisha filed a lawsuit only a couple days ago, suing the medical professionals who did this to her. But at some point recently, YouTube put a censorship placard on this YouTube video. So, for example, if I put that video in my news story, if you're scrolling through my news story and you see the video, you won't see anything except a big black box that says it's been censored for age-appropriate content. And so you have to go to YouTube to actually see that. And so what YouTube did is they're making it so that less people will see this video, and it looks somehow kind of nefarious, you know, like, oh, age-appropriate, like, oh, you got to click to YouTube. Better not watch that at work, you know, like, if something's wrong there. And so I asked YouTube for answers on this. They actually got back to me earlier today, and they said that they stand by their censorship and that it's censored. They wouldn't actually say to me why they censored it. IWF, and I also agree that it was probably censored because at one point, Prisha lifts up her shirt and shows the audience her chest. And obviously, since she had a double mastectomy, She no longer has breasts, and in their place there are 2 scars. It's a very moving and emotional part of the video, and a very vulnerable part for Prisha. Obviously, a very scary thing to do. But Prisha isn't the only one that has showed her chest in this manner and her scars on YouTube. But she happens to be the one that they're censoring.
Well, wait a second. But isn't the position of these corporations like YouTube that if you go through the, quote, gender transition, if you have your breasts removed, that is now a male chest based on their posturing on this subject? Why would they censor the video if you're looking at what is supposed to be a man's chest?
That's a great point. I also asked YouTube about that. I didn't get direct answers back. I got kind of this vague directions to their community guidelines. And I had specifically sent them 2 different videos from this doctor. This doctor, if you haven't heard of Dr. Gallagher, you should Google what she does. And if your kids are on TikTok or on social media, you should be very aware what she's doing here. It is so insane. She has hundreds of thousands of followers on all different kinds of social media platforms where she advertises her surgeries, kind of like, look what I can do. She talks about how if you're overweight, as part of her double mastectomy surgeries, she can take a ton of extra skin off you and make you skinnier. So she's like, oh, don't worry, I can do it. I can fix it all. She claims that she can make fake genitalia, where she uses your intestines to craft certain parts of the body. It's incredibly so sad and disgusting. And this woman has videos on YouTube where she talks to her patients who are biological women who she has removed their breasts. And in these videos, you can see their scars, which they have from the double mastectomy procedure. Well, I sent one of those videos to YouTube, and I said, what about this? Does this violate your standards? And they ignored what I said and sent me a generic statement about the video about Prisha. So I followed up again, and I said, what about this video? Does this violate your standards? They haven't answered me. I assume it doesn't because it's pro-transgender content. It's the alleged gender-affirming care, and so they allow it to sit.
So convincing children that their body is a mistake is not age-restricted, but telling children that they were born in the body that God gave them, and that's not a mistake at all, that needs to be age-restricted? Do I understand the rules?
That's what it sounds like, and I would love to have a more frank conversation with YouTube about this. In fact, I called the guy who sent me that email earlier today trying to have a more honest conversation about this.
Yes.
I would just like to know the facts, like, was the video censored because Prisha lifted up her shirt? I would like to know that. They won't tell me that. Why aren't they censoring this Dr. Gallagher's videos when she's promoting transgender surgeries and stuff like that to kids on all her platforms? And by the way, little tangent here, I reached out to TikTok and said, hey, is this going, like, are you guys profiting from this woman advertising trans surgeries to kids? Like, she's certainly profiting from it. Are you guys profiting from it? They didn't answer me. I've asked them a bunch of times, not gotten any answers. But it seems like there's a whole bunch of people.
Well, they are. I mean, the answer to that question, I think, is yes, because if the content is on TikTok and they're benefiting from that content being there, then yes, they are profiting off of all of this and not doing anything to stop it. So a Chinese-run company is trying to convince American children that they should hack their bodies up, that their body is a mistake, that the only answer is the big pharmaceutical companies, injecting them full of chemicals, cutting off their genitals. I mean, this is demonic, frankly, Mary Margaret, and these companies are all in on it. And then when you ask questions, they just all of a sudden clam up. I mean, at this point, they should just be shamed into submission.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I cover a lot of culture issues, and it's interesting who will talk to you and who won't talk to you. Like, for example, abortion doctors love to tell you, abortionists love to tell you about themselves. They love to regale you with their expertise. These trans activists, they seem a lot more wary and aware that they could get in trouble.
Well, there's also, one thing that I was thinking of as you were laying all this out is you and I both know that, what reality is here, that, no matter what however you identify, no matter what you call yourself, the reality is your body's not a mistake. You're made in the image of God, and you are who you are. You're a boy or a girl. And yet what you have among like the people who say as adults that they're transgender, you've heard from some of these people who say, yeah, I'm transgender. But even among adults who say that, have you noticed that a great deal of them also say no kid should do this? No kid, just hit the brakes on this. Do not do this until you go through all the growing you need to go through before you make such a big decision. Even they are saying that. And yet their voices are kind of silenced in this debate for the cruelest torture imaginable.
Yes, it's very insidious. You have voices in the transgender movement saying this is not okay for kids, this is dangerous, this is irreversible. But then I have a story going up on this in a couple minutes. You got organizations like GLAAD, the gay and lesbian, I don't know what the organization is called, something GLAAD.
Yeah.
This is a very pro-transgender organization, and they are really upset with new legislation that Senator J.D. Vance introduced that would ban these sex change procedures for kids. It would also ban teaching how to perform these sex change procedures on kids, and I think ban taxpayer funding of them. Really interesting legislation. GLAAD went so far as to say that no one is performing these types of transgender procedures on kids, and trying to act like J.D. Vance was, some alarmist. What? Trans procedures for kids? But we know it's happening. There's lawsuits out there. Chloe Cole was 15 years old when doctors removed her breast. Now she's suing Kaiser and the Permanente Foundation. Also, Prisha's suing. So we know there's a lot of people who sought to transition as minors, and yet you have GLAAD gaslighting the American public and trying to tell you it's not happening. And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more instances of the fact that that's just not true.
That's right. This is the old, it's not happening and it's good that it is. And you say, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? It's the left. It's how they operate. It's getting more and more insidious. Mary Margaret, thank you very much for digging into this. Please give YouTube hell. Please keep bugging them about this, because it's a great public service and they should be forced to answer what they're up to here. Thank you very much. A wild week. We've gotten so much already. The IRS whistleblowers out with the details of the corruption in our government, the Biden bribery allegations today, that FD 1023 form now public. You can read it. You can find it on my Twitter account, @Vince Coglianese. It's right there for you to see. It's only 3 pages long. Not that much homework to find out about the corruption inside our government. The FBI has admitted that they did admit to Twitter the day the New York Post story came out that the Hunter laptop was real. They told them, and Twitter censored it anyway, because they were working overtime for the Democrats. So much. And despite the fact that we've learned all that this week, there was no greater moment than this one.
Well, as you all know, today is National Hot Dog Day. And perhaps you also know that hot dog is my favorite meat. I love hot dogs. I love them in buns. I love them outside of buns. I love them with baked beans. I just like hot dogs. It's the best meat there is, without question. So to all of you who, like me, are celebrating National Hot Dog Day, congratulations to you, and may there be many, many more hot dogs served in our wonderful land.
Obviously, Mitt Romney releasing that right in the middle of the IRS whistleblower hearings yesterday, because that man does not know how to read a room, and he never will. That'll never happen. Hey, if you like the Vince Coglianese Show, you're going to love the podcast. If you miss anything, you can always pick it up there. Julie Kelly was on today, Emily Jashinsky, Congresswoman Virginia Foxx. You just heard Mary Margaret Olohan. Dynamite. They're all the best. And so are you. Thank you, as always, for listening. Great to have you here today. We're going to stay on this detransitioner issue. It's a big one. The media really hates talking about this because it involves the truth. And it involves exposing these industries that are paying them to shut up and be silent about it all. So we'll stay on that. Also, the Biden crime family. Can't get enough of that story because we can't wait to get him out of office. We'll continue that. The great one, Mark Levin, up next here on WMAL.